Hello everyone and welcome back to AmmoMart.com, where you can find real firepower online. I'm Rodney Phillips and I'm very excited to be with you here today in discussing something that will not only change your shooting life, but it actually might save your life, and it's dry fire. Dry fire specifically at home. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, going back decades, institutions like the United States Marine Corps would have a process before you go to the rifle range, and it was called snapping in. And what we did was stand around or sit around 55-gallon drums that had small silhouette targets painted on them, and you would practice firing your AR at the targets. It got you ready to go to the range. It put the memory, the muscle memory on your brain and your finger, so you know what a smooth trigger pull is. Here's the great thing. Every person that owns a firearm can do this at home, and in fact, they should do this at home. I live in Ohio. Concealed carry permit holders in Ohio are only required to go to 8 hours of training. That quite simply isn't enough, even though I'm a really big fan of citizens being able to do that. The fact of the matter is, a lot of people walk out of that permit process thinking, I have all the skills I'll ever need, and that quite simply isn't true. And in my humble belief, you can never improve as much on the range as you can at home with a good dry fire committed practice session. So let's talk about doing that safely. What I recommend is you pick an outside wall in your home. If you have a basement walls are fantastic. If you don't have that, we're going to pick a wall that goes onto the outside, not the inside. And hopefully on the other side of the outside wall won't be, say, a school. A safe outside wall. We don't want to choose interior walls because in case we have an inadvertent discharge, which we shouldn't, it doesn't go through your house and into the bedroom or the nursery. So, number one rule of dry fire practice at home, there are never any live rounds allowed in the practice room ever for any reason. And that tenet is never compromised. The way I do it at home is I have magazines that are empty and they always stay in the practice room. No live rounds. Then another safe practice is to actually physically hang a target up on the wall. I do know people that dry fire at home and their favorite thing to do is to use a picture of a relative they don't like anymore. People use light switches, receptacle covers, whatever their story is. I'm not a fan of that. I don't like using inanimate objects for that sort of thing because there are actually documented cases of people forgetting that they were no longer into dry fire practice and actually had a loaded gun, pulled the gun out and shot the wall. Not a good idea. So hanging the target prompts your brain that I'm now in practice mode. Conversely, when we're done practicing, I want you to remove that target and say out loud, as ridiculous as this might sound to people, that I'm done practicing, my session is now over. Also prompts your brain that, wow, now I have a loaded gun, no more playing around. One of the most important advantages to dry fire practice comes down to money. Everybody knows how expensive ammunition has gotten in the last couple of years. When you can find it, and when you can find it, nobody wants to go to the range and shoot it. So, believe it or not, your best chance to improve, whether there's an ammo crunch or not, is at home. And the reason is, you can practice without stress. There's no guns going off beside you. There's no anxiety of, wow, I'm handling a loaded gun I haven't had contact with in a long period of time, which shouldn't be the case anyway if we're practicing at home. The fact of the matter is, the range creates stress. And stress is very bad for shooters that are trying to develop their skills. I'll show you a quick demonstration of some of the things I do when I'm dry firing at home. And as we do some more videos down the road, we'll actually cover specific drills or skill sets that you can work on safely in your living room. So let's go see what it's all about. So here we are. This is the room I actually do 90% of my training in, believe it or not. As we talked about before, we're going to go through a very basic dry fire session at home, following some of the safety procedures that we talked about earlier, and we'll actually go through a bit of a skill drill for just a few seconds so everybody can kind of get the idea of what it is we're talking about. So, of course, to begin, we must have a target. So I'm going to go over, hang up the target, so we have something to sight on. Okay, target's hung. Next thing that we need to do is make sure that we're not having any accidents by bringing live rounds into the practice room, which we should never do anyway. So I'm going to have an empty magazine. I have another empty magazine, and of course, an unloaded gun. Clear chamber, empty magazine well. One of the more crucial pieces of equipment that you need, in my opinion, to safely dry fire practice at home is a snap cap, and some people call it A-zooms. They're just based on the manufacturer. These guys are awesome. This is the exact size of a 9mm bullet. It's inert, it makes no noise, and if you look at the back, where the primer of the round would be, is actually a rubber disc. That disc gives your firing pin something to back into, preventing damage. Some manufacturers claim you can never damage their gun by dry firing it. However, I will leave you with this. Never dry fire a rimfire cartridge without a snap cap. You will, without question, damage the firing pin at some point, leaving the gun inoperable. So, one of the other really important pieces of equipment are, sorry about that advertisement, is a dry fire shot timer. This has multiple applications in that I can set it up to do a particular skill drill. This one I just have set on fast draw. Fast draw is pretty cool because I can program in the par time. The par time is nothing more than a recorded time that you think it would take you to complete a particular skill. Now, while we're talking about time, it's extremely important that we get one thing down, and that is this. Your brain cannot distinguish between an incorrect and a correct action. This is what I mean by that. If I'm practicing too fast and sort of going beyond the speed limit for my particular skill set, look at it this way. If I use what Scott Jedlinski calls the jinky draw, your brain doesn't really know that's not what it wants to do. And it creates a substance called myelin, which is sort of an insulator for memory and motion. And so it's sort of a neural net. Now, the problem with that is jinky becomes okay. The way to correct this is slow and exact movement when you first begin training. That way, what's myelinized is correct, efficient, and sort of the economy of movement with the correct presentation of the firearm. That's what's reinforced. That's what's sort of kept, for lack of a better word. Of course, as we move forward, the goal will always be to get faster and faster without sacrificing accuracy. But we must begin slowly. Can't stress that enough. So let's step on over here and go through a little bit of a normal dry fire session. I'm going to take my snap cap and one of the magazines. Get this guy loaded up. Gun here. I'm going to load by closing the slide and face the target. What you'll hear next is a beep. I'll go and draw on the beep, present the gun onto the target, hopefully get on the target and pull the trigger in 5 seconds, where you'll hear the following beep. There I fired. I have to recock this particular gun. And you can see we can just go on and on like this. Now, this particular app, you can program in the amount of reps. You can also program the amount of time that takes place between the reps. Available for iPhone as well as Android, and I really like these sorts of tools because it lets you know how much you're progressing. Another really important aspect of all of this, and I believe I mentioned it earlier, is if you can somewhat practice in front of a mirror, it lets you know whether or not you're actually bringing the gun forward with the right presentation, flat, whether you're acquiring the sights quickly enough, what's actually going on with your support hand, things like that. They're almost invaluable sessions that you could never duplicate on the range because of the very nature of live fire training. Completely different mindset. I hope this has been helpful to you guys, and remember, train safely, but you have to train. It's all about the practice. Thanks a lot. Hello everyone. So that's pretty much what happens in a very basic dry fire session. As you progress, and there's a lot of valuable sources online where you can get tips, and we'll do some in later videos down the road of specific things that you can do to improve your shooting. Remember this, you can practice dry fire with any weapon that you intend to protect your home with, whether it's a shotgun, an AR, a lever action rifle. They are almost infinite the amount of calibers that you can get snap caps for. Pretty much, if they make it, you can get a cap for it, and that means you can practice at home. One of the concerns I always had, whether I was at the range or behind the counter in sales, was the amount of people that actually carry guns in public and have no idea what they're going to do when they're confronted with an emergency. Let me explain. People come in, usually they're new concealed carry permit holders. About 70% of them have already purchased their gun, and I would dialogue with them and ask them things. Well, what kind of clothes do you wear in the wintertime? Do you wear a heavy coat? Or are you kind of a minimalist hoodie? What kind of guy are you? And they're like, why does that matter? Well, here's why. You need to have a plan for how you're going to clear a garment and access your gun. At about that time is when I would usually start getting a lot of blank looks. So one of the other advantages to dry fire practice is you can work out where on your person carrying your spare magazines, if you're going to do that, works best for you. Where do I want to carry the gun? Am I better at appendix carry? Do I do it at the 6 or 9 o'clock position? How is that going to work? And what do I do with my hands as I'm trying to access all of this? The samurai used to say, if you haven't done something 10,000 times, then you haven't done it at all. Repetition is what's going to allow you to live through a dangerous event and become a better shooter, even if your intention is just to become a target shooter. In my humble opinion, you cannot get that done even if you have a range 40 feet outside of your door. Don't underestimate the importance of dry fire, and the most important aspect of it, besides doing it safely, is that you actually do it. Owning a gun and not practicing with it is trying to have a guitar I haven't seen in 10 years, and now I'm going to try to go on tour with it. It's just not going to work. You've chosen to use a life safety tool, and now you must master it in the best way, dry fire practice at home. Thank you for your time. This has been AmmoMart.com, Real Firepower Online. Are you guys still here? Go home. Are you too good for your home? But before you go, like and subscribe.